So thank you all so much for being here today. Really appreciate you coming and joining me for this hour and a half that we'll be together. So we're going to be talking about hope today. Before we turn to the topic, I just want to introduce myself for those of you who may not know me. My name is Danielle Lasusa. I call myself a practical philosopher, which for some people might sound like an oxymoron, but I believe it's possible. And what that means for me is that I'm a philosophical coach, which means that I use my training in philosophy to help talk to people about their everyday conflicts, issues, things that they want to work through. I'm also a writer, a speaker. I have a podcast called Think Hard, which we've stopped putting out new episodes, but we've got a pretty great catalog of 50-some episodes. And I just want to make a small little note. I did this in the last presentation. So you may be confused by the idea of someone being a philosophical coach. That is a title I just made up. And it really just means, as I said, I use my training in philosophy to serve people by asking them questions about their life and helping to clarify their thinking. And I just want to say that this is actually not a new idea for philosophy, that in fact philosophers were sort of the original therapists. Before psychology was its own discipline, which was really only in the mid-19th century that happened. And I just want to make sure that everyone is muted. So if you're not muted yet, go ahead and mute yourself. And so if you had, if you were in ancient Greece, for example, and you had a problem or a, something that you needed to sort out in your head, you didn't go to a therapist. There weren't any. Maybe you went to a cleric, a clergyman or priest or something, or you went to a philosopher. And that was it. So philosophers have always kind of been the original therapists. And now there's sort of a growing movement of philosophers outside of academia doing this kind of work again, myself among them. So what that means is that I use my PhD in philosophy to help people think clearly, choose wisely, and live purposefully. I specialize in helping moms grapple with what it means to make a human being, because it's not a small thing, creating a human person. And my services include one-on-one philosophical coaching. I do workshops. I teach a course called the Meaning of Motherhood course. And I'm actually in the process of developing something very exciting, an online community that I'm super pumped about. So more info about that coming soon. I apologize for the loud construction sounds. Was not anticipated there would be people working outside my window. I hope it's not too distracting for you all. If it is, someone, tell me in the chat, let me know. Okay, so today we're going to cover how and why to choose hope even when the world is terrible. And there are some more details to that. We're going to talk about the difference between hope and optimism. There's, I think, an important conceptual and useful distinction there. We're going to talk about hope being a kind of decision and a virtue, not necessarily a feeling or a mood, and I'll talk about what I mean by that. We'll talk about hope as a habit. Seems kind of strange, but we'll talk about that. And then we'll talk about why to hope even when success is not guaranteed and maybe not even likely. Okay. Then we're going to have a volunteer, and we actually have someone who has volunteered. Sarah's going to be our volunteer today. Thank you very much, Sarah. And so we'll do a sort of mini session with her to talk about some of the issues with hope that she wants to work with. We're going to end with a Q&A. And you'll have time to ask questions and give me your feedback. And just to note that this is being recorded, and I'm going to share it on my website and social media. So if you want to, mute your video or whatever, you may. I encourage you to show up and be visible and be present, because people learn from watching people learn. I think that that's how we do it. So thank you for being here for that. All right, any questions or anything so far? We good? Thumbs up? Excellent. All right. All right. And if you just came in, if you can make sure that you are muted so I don't get any feedback, that would be great. Okay, so before we get started, I just feel the need to pause for a minute and notice that we need to say something about privilege and power. I'm a white person talking about hope in a moment when the basic value of Black lives needs to be asserted. And the problems with that is not lost on me. So I just want to acknowledge that. And I struggled with whether or not to even talk about this today, given everything that's going on in the world right now. But I've decided to do it for a couple reasons. One, I think that as white people, we need to educate each other, and not all of you here today are white, but many of you are. And two, thanks for that. Someone said, I think it's great you're still in that class. Thank you. And two, I think that hope is applicable to a broad range of situations, including racial justice, but not only racial justice, social justice, other kinds of social justice, environmental justice, interpersonal goals and situations. Like, we can talk about hope in a variety of ways. And I think that this lesson will be applicable, I hope, to all of them. That said, I welcome your feedback, your constructive criticism, your call in. I like the term call in rather than call out. I think it invites conversation and mutual learning and understanding. So I invite you to engage with me in that way. Okay, so if we're going to talk about hope, we need to, I think, face the grim reality of the situation. So I'm going to give you some pretty devastating statistics, not that you need to hear them again, but just so we know that you know that I know how bad things are, all right? I'm not going to be a Pollyanna about this, right? 1 billion children worldwide are living in poverty. 1 billion children worldwide are living in poverty. 1 in 3 women will be the victim of sexual violence within her lifetime. Black Americans are 2.5 times more likely to be killed by police than white Americans. The top 1% of the richest people in the US own 35% of the country's wealth. And climate change, as we know, is happening at a rapidly astonishing rate, making the world uninhabitable for many species. We're having sort of a mass extinction and increasingly less habitable for our own species. Of course, that often gets and is being distributed not evenly, but disproportionately. There are some parts of the world that are feeling that more harshly than others. So I'm not gonna lie, there are lots of reasons to feel hopeless right now and to feel overwhelmed by the state of the world. Oh, and don't forget, there's also a global pandemic happening. So like, there's that too. Right? Don't wanna leave that out of the mix. So there's lots of reasons to feel overwhelmed and hopeless at the moment. I'm not going to try and talk you out of any of those things. I'm not going to try and pretend that none of those things are happening, or that they're not that bad, or that they're not that important, or any of that. Like, it's bad. We're not going to deny that. So given that reality, given the data, given the evidence, what are we going to do about it? How are we going to think and talk about hope in the face of this grim reality? Now, it just so happens that the thing I want to talk about, we're going to start by talking about the distinction between optimism and hope. And that comes from, I got it from Cornel West, who was, and the place that he brought this distinction, or that he talks about this distinction, it just so happened to be in the aftermath of the protests in LA in 1992. So I swear I planned this before the last few weeks have happened. It just so happens that, you know, what's known as the LA riots, was the context for Cornel West's, I think, important distinction between optimism and hope. So I just wanted to remind us all, of course, this is on the minds of everybody right now, but I wanted to remind us all exactly what that was and what happened. So anyone of a certain age will recognize this image. This was the video footage caught in 1991 of Rodney King being brutally assaulted by 4 police officers who beat him within an inch of his life with batons. And this happened in 1991. That video footage went public, and South Central Los Angeles erupted. It was a sort of powder keg of racial tensions and poverty and anger. And when that video came out, people started taking to the streets, and not only taking to the streets and protesting, but there was actually quite a lot of damage done. Fires were set, people were looting. You can see fires here, people looting stores here. Here, the National Guard was sent in, California's National Guard. And as our current president is threatening to do, in 1992, actually federal military troops were sent into South Central Los Angeles after 6 days of protests. So we've been here before. And here, you can see this building. There were more than 3,700 buildings were damaged, and we're not just talking about like slightly damaged windows broken, but like some of them were burnt to the ground. Thousands of people were injured, and 63 people were killed in the course of these 6 days. So this is the context that Dr. West is talking about hope, right? And it feels a bit like deja vu for some of us. But I wanted to set the stage, right? Because this was a really big thing in the national sort of spotlight at the time, and it was full of so much anger and so much emotion and so much sense of hopelessness, I think, of so many people. And what Dr. West said is, he said, look, there's a distinction between hope and optimism. And this interview comes, by the way, from a wonderful play called Los Angeles 1992. It was performed by Anna Devere Smith. She interviewed a bunch of people at the time. And this is what Dr. West said. He said, actually, that optimism is when there's enough evidence to allow us to think that things are going to get better, right? Because he said, look, we've got to approach all of this like heartache and pain and suffering and everything that erupted in LA with this sense of hope and not optimism. He said that optimism is when we look at the evidence and we sort of cobble together a case for thinking that things are going to get better. Where it was like, oh, well, look, things aren't as bad as we think. Look at this data, look at that data. We can sort of like put together this sort of rational, sort of like a rational inference based on the evidence for the inference, right? Based on like all of this data, we can sort of infer that things are going to improve. That's optimism, he says. Hope, according to West, and this is the kind of hope I want to talk about today, is something different. This is what he said. He said, but hope looks at the evidence and says that it doesn't look good at all. It doesn't look good at all. We're going to go beyond the evidence to attempt to create new possibilities based on visions that become contagious, to allow us to engage in heroic actions, always against the odds, no guarantee whatsoever. That's hope. And that's the kind of hope I want to talk about today. Dr. West always has a way with words, and here's no exception. So if we go back here, we say, okay, optimism is when we look and we say, look, well, things aren't quite so bad, right? Like you can kind of say like, well, yeah, maybe the oceans are rising, but maybe like technology will save us. Look at the technology that's going to save us. Or like, look at the young people who are fighting to make things better, or whatever. Like, we try and like find these strands of evidence to like improve things. But in fact, hope doesn't do that. It just says, look, there is no guarantee of success, and perhaps even a likelihood of failure, right? It doesn't look good at all, right? And in spite of that, you commit to believe in the success or the improvement of the situation, regardless of whether or not there's evidence for it. In that way, it is. It feels very almost faith-based, right? And I want to say it's important that when you're talking about solutions and you're talking about action, you have to look at the evidence and the data, right? We started by saying, look, we got to look at the facts and see what's real and see what's there. And when we do our work, we have to look at the facts. But when we're talking about hope, we transcend the data and we just commit to believing, right? In this sense, hope is not a decision, or excuse me, hope is not a feeling, rather, it's a decision, right? It's not like something that you, it's not a mood, it's a commitment. You commit to hope. You commit to a belief in a brighter future, regardless of what's going on, regardless of anything else, regardless of what the data says. You commit, you make a decision that you're going to hope. According to Professor of Religion Jeffrey Stout, hope is a virtue, right? It's sort of another way of saying it, and it's funny because he and Cornel West are actually, they're friends. They were at a conference together, and at this conference, Jeffrey Stout talks about hope as a virtue, right? And virtue is sort of a tricky word. I think it can come with a lot of like baggage to it, right? And it has this kind of like religious connotation, but I do want to go back and say like hope itself has a kind of religious connotation. I'm going to go sort of quickly through this, right? The word hope comes from Old English, you can see on the right side here, which means confidence in the future, and it comes from particularly through God or Christ. It comes from this like English tradition of the Christian faith, right? Whereas optimism actually is a bit older of a word, and it comes from the optimus, the Latin, the best. And the word optimism actually means that the actual world is the best of all possible worlds, right? From Voltaire, right? And so this word hope does have this kind of like connotation of faith. And it had the word virtue also has a connotation of some sort of religious origins. But I think that what I want to say is that the kind of virtue that we're talking about here is not necessarily a religious virtue. In fact, I think it's much more the Aristotelian kind of definition of virtue, right? Aristotle, ancient Greek philosopher, and he talked a lot about virtue, so much that he created this sort of ethical framework that is now known in philosophy as virtue ethics. And the idea there is that a virtue is an appropriate behavior between two extremes to which we continuously aspire and aim. So, for example, you might say that honesty is a virtue, right? You want to be honest and appropriately honest. You're not going to just like, oh, that's a terrible haircut, right? You want to be appropriately honest. You don't want to be brash, right? Between two extremes, you don't want to lie. You want to be somewhere in the middle. And this is an appropriate behavior to which we continuously aspire and aim. So when Jeffrey Stout says that hope is a virtue, he's actually talking about Aristotle's definition of virtue, right? And it's funny because he and Cornel West were at a conference and they were talking about, you know, this idea of hope. And Cornel West said, like, you know, I want to be sure about our tone here. We don't want to be too cheerful when talking about hope, particularly when, as I noted at the beginning, like people's lives are on the line, right? So what Jeffrey Stout said in response to him was this. He said, the idea of hope that I have in mind when I talk about hope is not a mood, but a virtue. The mean between the vices of smug presumption and politically paralyzed despair, right? So again, it's that middle ground between two extremes. And then he says, so let your mood be as dark as you wish. Let it be as dark as mine. The question of hope is not a question of mood. It is the question of whether we can find it in ourselves to muster the moral fiber to act for justice and make a difference. If we can't, then our dark mood issues in the vice of despair. Right? And so the idea here is that, again, hope is not a feeling. It's not a mood. You can feel bad. You have good reason to feel bad. As I said from the beginning, the world is not looking so good in a lot of ways, right? You have good reason to feel bad, but that doesn't mean that you can allow yourself to fall into what Stout calls the vice of despair, right? Because what despair does is that it paralyzes us often, right? We think, it can't get better, why even try? I'm not going to succeed, why even try? And we end up sitting with our head in our hands, not doing anything, not going anywhere, feeling bad, right? And so if hope is something that we have to choose and something that we have to aspire to, right? You might say, I'm going to actually go to this next one here. You might say that we have a moral responsibility to hope, right? We have a moral responsibility to hope. So let's talk about what that hope actually means, what it looks like. Okay, I'm going to back up here. So you demonstrate hope through action. I think, again, I'm going to be using Aristotle here and also a lot of sort of existentialist thinking, that the way that we express our virtues, or the way we express our values, right? So if hope is a mood and not an orientation, or not a mood, it's an orientation and a virtue. And if it's something that we aspire to, that is something that is demonstrated through action, right? We choose our values and enact our virtues by what we do. So if you say that you value honesty, but you are a pathological liar, then you don't actually value honesty. If you say that you value time with your family, but you don't make time to spend with your family, then you don't actually value it, right? If you say that you value things, but you don't enact ways to express those values, then, you know, I'm going to challenge you and say, like, maybe you don't actually value it. The way that you express your values and you express your virtues is through actually enacting them. Again, this is Aristotle. He says, we become builders by building and harpists by playing the harp. Similarly, it is by doing just acts that we become just, by doing temperate acts that we become temperate, by doing brave acts that we become brave. Right? We express our virtues by actually doing them. And so if hope is not a feeling, but a virtue, we must express hope through our action, by doing something that shows that we believe that things could improve, even if the evidence doesn't support that, right? And the action that you have to do, of course, has to take the evidence into account, right? You have to actually see what the conditions of the ground on the ground are so that you can do action that is appropriate to the conditions, right? This is not just like blindly going in and fighting windmills, right? This is actually like seeing what's there, doing your little bit of acting toward that end so that you can make a difference. And all the while believing, hoping, right, that things are going to improve. Right. So again, in that way, we have a moral responsibility to hope. Insofar as hope allows us to continue to act for the success and improvement of the situations, we have a moral responsibility to hope. What's more, this hope has to be a habit, right? We need to create a habit of hope, right? Hope is a virtue built over time through repeated, consistent action toward your goal, right? This is not a once and done kind of thing. And I don't know about your social media feed, but I'm seeing a lot of, posts from Black activists and leaders saying like, okay, that's great that you're posting your white people, it's great you're posting your Black Lives Matter support right now, but don't stop doing that once this thing has passed, right? Don't stop doing the work. Please continue to care. Please continue to work, even after the, sort of performance aspect is done. Because that's what the nature of this work is. That's what the nature of any kind of enactment for change is that it's work. It takes time. It takes consistency. It takes patience and perseverance, right? It is something that has to be done over and over and over and over and over and over and over again, all the while believing that you will succeed, even if your efforts only make this much of a difference when it's a big mountain. Right? Again, Aristotle says, one swallow does not make a spring, nor does one day. Right? Swallow the bird, not the drink. Okay. So that, I think, is what I mean by the nature of hope, right? Hope is not a feeling, it's consistent behavior with the belief and commitment to eventual hopeful improvement, right? But the thing is, I just want to reiterate that hope does not come with guarantees, right? And that is actually a really important part of what I mean by this kind of hope. It does not come with guarantees, right? And so by that, in order to enact that or to express that, I want to talk about Jean-Paul Sartre. There was a little picture of him. I guess I'll pull it up here. This is Jean-Paul Sartre. He's a French philosopher. And, he talked about this too, that he was a really vocal voice in the French-Algerian War, where he said that the French occupation of Algeria was immoral. He was a communist working towards a socialist culture. And he talks about how look, there's really no guarantee that things are gonna go well here, right? And so he says, all of his political work, all of his writing, he said, I shall have no illusions and I shall do what I can. For example, I suppose I ask myself, will socialization, and that's his communist vision, as I ask myself, will socialization as such ever come about? I know nothing about it. I don't know if it's gonna happen. All I know is I'm going to do everything in my power to bring it about. And beyond that, I can't count on anything. Right? And even says, look, I might work my entire life for this political cause, and maybe, we do it and we achieve it. And then as soon as I die, the next round of leadership comes and they tear it apart and everything goes back to the way it was. It's totally possible for that to happen. But the possibility of it happening doesn't prevent me from doing the work. I'm just going to keep going. It feels a little bit like this, right? It feels a little bit like this. And yeah, it does, right? And this is an illustration meant to be sort of a modern twist, I guess, on the myth of Sisyphus, right? As a reminder, Greek history lesson, Sisyphus was a guy who was not looked kindly upon by the gods. He was criticizing them or something. And so when he died, he was given the, oh, and Sarah, you know this, you're a myth, you study myth. Awesome. Well, tell me if I'm getting it wrong. When he died, his punishment was to roll this boulder up a mountain until it almost reached the top, at which point it would roll back down the mountain, and then he would roll it back up the mountain. And he would just do this over and over for eternity. That was his punishment, right? And of course, Sisyphus acts as a metaphor, I think, for many of us who are trying to do something that feels like an impossible task, right? It's really, really hard, and it feels like an impossible task, and it feels like there's going to be no success. And so philosopher Albert Camus actually wrote an essay about Sisyphus. And he wondered a little bit about Sisyphus. And he said, okay, we got this guy, he's pushing the boulder up the mountain. It gets to the top and it rolls back down. And what do you think is happening in the mind of Sisyphus when he's walking back down the hill to go get the boulder again? Like, why is it that he gets to the bottom and then he starts again? He starts pushing the boulder back up. Like, why keep go? Why not just stop? Why not just like sit down and take a rest, or like hang out at the bottom of the hill for the rest of eternity? Why not just do that? Give up. Just give up. Stop working. Don't do it anymore. You can. You don't have to keep pushing the boulder up the hill. You could just stop. And Camus was like, well, why doesn't he stop? And his answer is this. He says, his fate belongs to him. His rock is his thing. The struggle itself toward the heights is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine Sisyphus happy. And he says, look, his rock is his thing, right? And by that he means like it is what he has to work with. There's not Netflix in this scenario, right? He's just got the rock. This is the thing. This is his task. This is what he has to work with. And he could just stop and just sit down and do nothing for eternity. But it is through his struggle with the rock, pushing it up the mountain, it is through the exertion of that energy that he finds his humanity. That is where he expresses his humanness. That is how he knows that he still exists. And so that's why Camus says that when he's pushing that rock up the mountain, you have to imagine him happy, because he has a thing that he's working with. And I think for all of us, whether we like it or not, this world is our thing. This is the thing that we are working with. And yeah, there are parts of it that are pretty bleak. And we could just stop and give up and watch Netflix or whatever, right? But it is through the struggle, it is through the exertion toward that imagined better future that we find our humanity. It is how we know we say yes to this world, by engaging with it and by hoping that positive change will come, even when it doesn't look good, even if there is no guarantee, even if it will never happen in 100 lifetimes or 1,000 lifetimes. You push the rock up the mountain because that's what you do, because you're a human and you say yes to the world. So that is my sense of why we keep working, why we hold on to hope, why we choose hope, even when we don't feel good. Because hope is needed right now. This world needs us to hope. We have a responsibility to hope. We have a responsibility to act through that hope for something better. So I'm going to leave this portion of my little presentation here. I'm going to stop talking soon and let you all engage. We'll turn to Sarah for a sort of little mini session. But I wanted to read this poem. It's called The Paradoxical Commandments, and it's by Kent M. Keith. Many of you may know this poem as Do It Anyway by Mother Teresa. And that is a variation of this poem, but this actually was the original. Mother Teresa adapted it for her purposes. And this version of it is secular and was written first. So I think it's worth reading in its entirety. So I'm going to do that. So this is The Paradoxical Commandments by Kent M. Keith. People are illogical, unreasonable, and self-centered. Love them anyway. If you do good, people will accuse you of selfish, ulterior motives. Do good anyway. If you are successful, you will win false friends and true enemies. Succeed anyway. The good you do today will be forgotten tomorrow. Do good anyway. Honesty and frankness make you vulnerable. Be honest and frank anyway. The biggest men and women with the biggest ideas can be shot down by the smallest men and women with the smallest minds. Think big anyway. People favor underdogs, but only follow top dogs. Fight for a few underdogs anyway. What you spend years building might be destroyed overnight. Build anyway. People really need help, but may attack you if you do help them. Help people anyway. Give the world the best you have, and you'll get kicked in the teeth. Give the world the best you have anyway. So there's that. Okay, so we're going to turn to Sarah, but does anyone have any questions logistically or anything that you want to say before we have our volunteer Sarah who's just going to talk to us about some of the things that she's been feeling in this current moment. I'm going to stop my screen sharing now so we can bring her up. Stop share. And, all right, Sarah, can you unmute yourself?
Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I got you there. Okay, so before we turn to it, does anyone have any comments, questions, anything? Okay, all right. So Sarah, thank you for being our in our little fishbowl here. I really appreciate you volunteering. Thank you for being vulnerable. I know that it's kind of a scary thing to be here in front of people, especially like while you're both here in front of people and at home in your house. It's very confusing, but I appreciate you being here anyway.
My pleasure.
So I'm going to try and do my best to kind of focus in on you, and you know, we're obviously going to have to do this in a truncated way, but it's basically just going to be you and I having a conversation about what you thought about, you know, this presentation and what you've been struggling with around this topic. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So, what do you think?
Well, when you first sort of asked for, you know, how to call out for volunteers and said, what are you struggling with right now? It is, as you mentioned earlier, completely ironic because the thing that I brought up to you was that amidst everything that's going on, I did have a memory, really clear memory of first witnessing the riots in LA and thinking of Rodney King. And while I've been doing all of the kinds of things, some of it kind of an armchair social media reactions to what's going on, I'm also been trying to figure out some real actions I can take, places I can donate, how can I help, how can I be an ally, all of those kinds of things. Something about remembering Rodney King did freeze me in a moment of feeling really overwhelmed and having a moment of some hopelessness, of thinking, good God, that was 30 some odd years ago. How are we still here? How the heck are we still here? And that was, I think, one of the things that was first on my mind when I even read the description of this class, among other things. So I think that that's just the basis of it, was that feeling of so much time has passed, and so much, I myself, and I've watched so many other people try to be so active and try to make a real difference. And while I have some moments of real beauty and grace and hope, I've also had a lot of moments of feeling pretty overwhelmed and falling into that despair, that trap of despair.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, yeah. I mean, it's been, in a way, not much has changed, not only in the last 30 years, but in the last 100 years, you know? I mean, I was reading work from W.E.B. Du Bois, who was, you know, he was writing about the police state in 1903. And so certain things have changed, but many things have not. And that can feel overwhelming. It can. In what ways do you think that feeling of like being overwhelmed had, like that sort of despair, like what's the impact of it on you?
Paralyzation. I get paralyzed. I notice that I start seeking comforting, and what if I'm really honest with myself, is also numbing activities. You kept mentioning Netflix, and I was like, I resemble that remark. And you know, any other number of things, food and you know, just trying to find, again, at the time I was thinking, well, it's a really hard world and I'm feeling overwhelmed, I'm just going to comfort myself. But what I really noticed is there are more numbing activities, not judging myself, I'm just aware that they're numbing activities that are taking me out of action and putting me into a place of just feeling frozen and paralyzed and unsure, lacking any confidence or any sense of kind of that putting energy into anything is worth it.
Yeah. Right, which is, I think, it gets really tricky, right? Because I think on the, especially when we're talking about racial politics as white women, right? Because in a way, I think that what often happens is that white people want to express the depth of their despair in order to demonstrate their alliance, right? It becomes a kind of performance of like, I'm one of the good ones. I really care about my Black brothers and sisters, and I really want them to be better. And it is very like, I'm overwhelmed by how terrible it is, right? And it's overwhelming. It is. I mean, like the racial equity in our culture is just like so incredibly heartbreaking. I mean, another thing Cornel West said in this interview that I took this sort of conceptual framework from, he says, you know, I think white people may understand like Black rage, but they will never understand Black sadness. It would just be too overwhelming for them. And so a lot of times I think what white people do is they sort of make a performance out of their sadness so that they can be counted as, you know, empathetic. And we all want to be seen as empathetic, and none of us want to be considered to be, you know, racist, even though we live in a racist society and we're all racist. And so it's part of the reason I think that you often see the response from activists of color saying, look, I don't need your tears, I need you to do something, right? Don't make me swim through your tears while I try and do this work, right? And so that can be another thing that sort of piles on, right? When you're feeling despairing, you're just like, I'm feeling despairing, and now I am like feeling guilty for feeling despairing.
Yes, exactly. The whole white women's tears thing, I get it. I have no interest in having my emotions need to take over this conversation, but I also can't deny that they're there. So like, how do you find that balance between, okay, I've got all these emotions, but that's not really the point. So feel the emotions, get over it, and now what?
Right. Right. And so the question, I think, becomes like, well, what do you do in that time when the emotions feel overwhelming? Right. And certainly we all cope with those emotions in different ways, right? Like we have ways of handling that feeling of overwhelm and that feeling of despair. And sometimes some of those coping strategies are more or less supportive than others, right? And I think that, again, another thing Cornel West said is you have to, like, people feel despair, and we're human beings, so we're going to feel despair from time to time, right? It is not like, and if you are an empathic person and you actually look at the facts and you see how terrible things are, you're going to feel some level of despair. Just is how it's going to be. But it has to be a starting point, not an ending point.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right? It has to be like, you don't deny it, don't push it away, don't feel guilty for feeling it. Feel it, do all the things that you need to feel it. And like feeling it all the way allows you to let all of the pain in, right? Because I think one sort of response is like, I don't want to feel bad, right? People just don't want to feel bad because feeling bad sucks, right? So like, I don't want to feel bad, so I'm going to say that like, it's not that bad, or, you know, the stats are lying, or I'm not going to like pretend like this can't possibly be true, right? And that kind of like denial of the data is one response. And if you are not denying the data and you say like, no, it really is that bad, and despair is in some ways an expected response. But again, it has to be a starting point. If you understand how bad it is, then you understand how much work needs to be done. And I think that part of it is possibly shifting our understanding of what work looks like. Because I think particularly for people with resources and privilege, work is something that means something a little bit different when you're used to getting the things that you want without a whole lot of effort. Mm-hmm. Right? When you're used to just being able to do a little bit and getting a big reward or getting a big outcome. And I think for a lot of people, work is something that it's just, I mean, you're just moving one little grain of sand from this mountain over to that mountain, and that's what it looks like, right? And so part of it is understanding how big the project is and how much we need each other in order to do the task, right? Because understanding how big the job is, you also understand the need for community.
The need for what? Say that again.
For community.
For community.
So I've been talking a lot. What do you think of all this?
I completely agree. And that honestly, that's one of the reasons I'm here. That's one of the whole reasons that I responded as soon as I saw your invitation for the class. It felt super obvious to me that that's exactly what I needed. I needed community, I needed some commiseration, and I needed a loving kick in the butt, I guess would be the best way of saying it. Like, again, without judgment over, everyone has their feelings and emotions, as do I, but I really wanted to make sure that I didn't spend too long in the in the wallowing place. Yes. Go there, like you said, experience it, feel it, but now what? And because I was feeling so deflated and also just not sure what to do next, that whole question, what now? What do I do? How can I help? Even though that's not the topic of this class specifically, it was cultivating hope was something that I was hoping then would be motivating, would help me find that mojo again, that energy, that place of, and like you're saying, the community, that just makes perfect sense. Why would I try to do any of this alone? That's completely against the whole point of the topic that we're talking about. So where else is there community? Where are there like-minded people? How can I learn? How can I listen and pay attention to what would be the actual things that would be helpful for me to do, rather than what I think or what I've made up in my own little white brain? What's actually going to be helpful? So to be able to listen and work together and not feel like I'm in a silo and that I'm just sitting in my own little wallowing and not being able to move forward.
Yeah. Well, and, I think something that I keep hearing is like, look, there are lots of people who have been doing this work for a really long time. And they join them. That's what you can do.
Don't reinvent the wheel.
Yeah. Lots of people have already been writing the books and the articles and handing out the resources and starting the community organizations and, raising the money and doing all the things. So you don't need, as you say, to reinvent the wheel. You just need to find them and help with their efforts. And I don't know, I'm curious, do you think that after listening to my little spiel, do you feel differently? Do you still feel in despair?
No, I feel like you've given me a sense of a roadmap as a way out. The difference between optimism and hope. And one of the things I was going to ask, I kept forgetting. Are we gonna be able to have access to the slides and the presentation afterwards?
Sure, I can send it to you all if you'd like.
That would be amazing, because just some of those quotes, and the poem and everything, I feel like that's what's going to push me out of the despair in a good way, not in a a judgy way at all. It's an inspiring way. It's so good to be reminded that hope and motivation and all those other words that I'm not thinking of right now, the momentum to make things happen, doesn't really matter how you feel in the moment. The feelings is so, I love that. Well, yeah, you feel down and you feel grumpy and you feel this and you feel all of those things. That doesn't really matter. Do it anyway. And that's just a really helpful reminder, because it's so easy to have the feelings become the thing that's the most important.
Right.
And to be able to say, yeah, feelings are important. And what now?
Right. Right. Yeah. Feel it. Sure. Indulge in your despair in the sense of do all the things that you feel sad about, but don't let it paralyze you. Because that's what the vice is knowing, if you know how bad it is and then you give up. Right. You're saying no to life when you do that. I really do feel like saying yes to the cause, whatever your cause is saying, it's like saying yes to life. It's saying yes to the world. It's saying yes to the human condition, right?
The whole image of Sisyphus as a positive figure, I mean, as a mythology expert, whatever, as someone who's done the whole mythology things forever, and Sisyphus I've studied 12 Ways from Tuesday, never did I come across that image of Sisyphus as a happy image. And that's awesome. And that's one of those things where my brain is, there's popcorn going on in my skull right now. And it's going to be the next few days that I'm continuing to absorb some of those images. But the thought of the hard work still being meaningful and motivational, and even when it does feel hopeless in some ways, or like you said, no guarantees of an outcome, can't hold on to whatever the outcome is that you hope or think is going to happen. Do it anyway, but rock back up and keep rolling. It is, for whatever reason, that's going to be an image that really sticks with me for a while. It's a whole new idea on a myth that I thought I knew inside and out.
That's great. Well, and just for the other listeners, Sarah's not just someone who's been studying mythology. You have a PhD in mythology, and you specialize in Joseph Campbell.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Own it.
Okay, thank you. You're right. I am a doctor of mythology. And a doctor of mythology can still, after 20 years, learn something new and have a whole new perspective, blow up different neurons in the brain in a really exciting way. So thank you for that image. It's going to be something that sticks with me for a while, and add energy and energy to the work, and to getting out there, and to getting up and making it happen and doing it anyway.
Fun. And you should go read Albert Camus' essay. It's a long essay, and it's really wonderful.
Yes, I already wrote it down.
Good.
Camus.
I should say that I will be, so rather than sending the slides to everybody, I'll be sending a video of this, so you'll have access to all the stuff there. So I think that'll probably be the best way to do it. Well, great. Thank you, Sarah, for being our little guinea pig here. We've got about a half an hour left. So I'm going to open up to questions for everybody, and let's have a conversation now. This is a chance for you to tell me what you think. If you think that my offering here, my conceptual framework here is missing something important, please let me know, and let's talk. If you want to say something, just go ahead and unmute yourself, or another way to do it here, if you go to, what is it? I think if you go to participants, you can raise your hand. Is that true? Might be a way of doing that. Maybe not on this one. That's right. If you have a question, go ahead and unmute yourself, and we'll talk. Thank you so much, Sarah, for being our guinea pig. And I'm really glad to hear that that something shifted here for you. And I think that I'm there with you, right? Like, it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming, and I think right now there are a lot of white folks who are experiencing the same thing, right? Who are suddenly sort of becoming aware of the data and the reality in ways that perhaps they did not, they weren't aware of it before, and it can be overwhelming. And so I think it's more important than ever that all of us really see our action as meaningful, and our hopeful orientation toward action as vitally important.
Well, I just wanted to thank you for that opportunity. I've done, philosophy classes with Monica and with you, so I understand. I really appreciate the philosophical background, but it's true, even I had no idea what philosophical coaching was going to look like. So thank you for the opportunity to do a little snippet of it and experience it firsthand.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And, in a regular one-on-one session, I would generally do much less talking, I think.
Fair enough. This is a class, but I appreciate being part of the demonstration. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, who else has questions, comments, concerns, thoughts? And I'm a teacher, so I'm used to just like sitting quietly until someone says something.
I'm wondering how, since you helped Sarah get to the point of realizing the importance of hope, how do we help others and inspire others to get to that point too, once we arrive at how important hope is?
I mean, it's a good question. I think, do you mean like when you encounter friends or family who are just sort of in the despair place? Yeah. Well, what's your sense of it?
I think that, like as Sarah was talking about, the ways that we're trying to find how to continue that hope and be active on it, and be allies and in certain situations and try to feel like we're making a difference. I mean, but I've just been trying to encourage others to do the same thing.
Mhm.
And of course, we can't force anybody to do anything, but that's all I've noticed, the extent of what I can do. And I'm not sure if that's bringing others hope, or because, like you said, there's some people that try, or they're stuck in despair and they're in denial of it. I'm not sure how to help pull people out of that.
Well, I think there's sort of different like parts of the journey, right? There's sometimes the like, I am not going anywhere near the despair place. Like, I don't even want to risk having to go into that area because it's too uncomfortable. I do not like it. I'm just going to like not even look at it. Not there. I'm not looking, right? And that kind of like denial place is really done, I think, from just like a fear of vulnerability, right? That we all have. We all are afraid to be that vulnerable, and it is there's a lot of pain there, right? And it's really hard to sit with people's pain. My sense that the best way to work with people who are afraid to sit with pain is to be willing to sit with their pain and be willing to sit with their fear of pain when you see it, and be willing to ask them about that. And if they don't want to engage, to at least be able to see that the fear is being expressed in a certain way, right? Of like not wanting to look. I do think, one of the important tasks that white allies can do is to talk to the other white people in our life about what's going on, particularly those who are resistant to seeing it. And that's really scary, particularly if the people that you are talking to are like, conservative friends and family, right? It can be really hard and really scary. But we have to be willing to be vulnerable in that sense. And we have to be willing to see other people's vulnerability and to be present for it. I think that's a first step, it's not a last step, because there is always more learning to do, and more ways people can grow, and more work for us to do. But again, this is the work. The work is slow. The work is incremental. The work is day after day, consistently, not just when like things happen in the news, but when they don't. And remembering that that is part of our work. And I also think leading by example is a really powerful way of leading, and doing your best to initiate difficult conversations, but also to do other kinds of work, because there's a lot of it to be done. Thanks, McCartney.
Thank you.
I could add something to that, although it looks like Jake also raising his hand, maybe.
Oh no, go ahead. I'll talk after you. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, so this kind of goes along with the myth of Sisyphus, and that maybe it's not all that bad, but you just mentioned like slow incremental change can make a difference, and if you keep plotting and plotting and plotting, eventually you might see something that will make you hopeful. So this is just more of like a sharing comment thing, but my husband yesterday got a text message from a friend of his from high school, and they went to high school in Florida, and they'd had this kind of group of high school students that kept in touch over the years. Now they all have kids and are married and that kind of thing, and a bunch of them are pretty conservative, and there's been some conversation in the text message chain that has gotten on the topics of race, guns, like a lot of things that are pretty polarizing and complicated. And my husband Dan and his brother have over the years played a little bit devil's advocate and tried to kind of poke the bear as far as the ideologies that have come out of those conversations. And that's the kind of arena that I've often felt really hopeless in. Like, you've got these people that have really solidly decided they are in one camp and they're never going to change their minds. And every time you try to debate or get engaged in their conversations, it just goes right to like heated really quickly, and you can never get anywhere. And that can make you feel really hopeless. Like, how are we just living in a bubble, and like no one's ever going to really change their mind? And when you see like news, it can feel really polarized and hopeless. But I think eventually some stuff does change. So anyway, so he got a text message last night from a friend of his on this message saying, hey, I want to apologize for the years of these communications that we've had. I am just now realizing that I have white privilege, and that I have made some big mistakes, and that, basically you guys were right, I was wrong. And there's work to be done here, and I recognize it now. And I was like, whoa, that's incredible. And Dan, my husband, was like really impressed and was like, thanks, buddy. Like, no need to apologize. The point now is that you're aware of this. Is like, what do you do moving forward? And like, yeah, and that was really, really, really cool to see. And this guy is not like a piece of crap, he's like a guy with a strong moral compass. Those are Dan's words, but he's a good guy, like, but he just never really clicked. Like, it never really made sense because of his culture and education and society and all of that. Mm-hmm. So that to me was like, oh, this is super cool, because I've kind of felt like for so long we having those debates and trying to change the other, like our contemporaries' minds, like other white people, those that don't really see the light, how to try to get them to change. And it feels like you never even convince one person your entire life, and that can feel so discouraging. But it does help eventually. And so maybe one way to, if you've got other people that are feeling desperate in despair,
Mm-hmm.
Are those the same word?
I think so.
Do those have the same base? Yeah, if you're seeing those people, maybe give them examples of those that have changed and in ways that the light bulbs have gone off for others, and that might make them feel like, okay, I do have the ability to change if I just keep at this. Or like, maybe one person from my high school will change their mind, and that's enough to keep plotting.
Yeah, I actually just I think it was Lizzo. I don't know if this is a misquote or not. It might be, but a quote that says, they say it takes 15 years to be an overnight success, right? Like, if you're going to try and make it in whatever arena, it takes about 15 years. And so when I say like slow change, I think a lot of people right now are calling for revolution, right? This is not just like, oh, let's make some little incremental change. Like, we want real reform here and real revolutionary radical change. But sometimes, for that revolution to come, it takes years and years and years and years of seeing very little change first, right? And so and it may come in, one person changing their mind. Overnight, suddenly they change their mind, even though it took however many years of talking first. Yeah, thank you, Ariel.
I was just going to say that I think this might, I don't know if this sounds like white privilege, so I'll just put that out there. But I think that the way to go, and I'm turning 60, and I think that, when you've been around longer and kind of seen how slow things move, it's disheartening, and I remember when there are different points where I've done different things and experienced oppressive times, and then worked with young people like 20 years later, and they're dealing with the same crap that I dealt with 20 years ago, with the queer community. And so I just think that, and this is the white privilege piece potentially, I think it's so important for people that look white on the street and have that privilege whether they're mixed race or not, they still are white on the street, which is my case. You have to unpack the years of the brainwash. I mean, you know, my mother's Lebanese American, and unfortunately, I was brainwashed to not tell anybody that I was half Arabic, just to be white, because it's not safe to be anything other than white. And, you know, I have not faced physical violence at all, obviously, because I'm white, I look white. But it's important to unpack all the different ways that we've been brainwashed, you know. It's our responsibility, the way we've been brainwashed to be afraid of people of color, and to be aware of that as we take steps to make change happen. But I really, really think, you know, I recently was at a dinner with white lesbians that are approximately my age, and we're all talking about everything that's going on, and the conversation shifted to when we were, you know, 9, 10, 15, and, you know, oh, I dated a boy that was black for, you know, a week in high school, and then everybody discouraged me from continuing to date him in the 70s. I mean, that's what we've lived with, and that's like in us. And you have to, it's like infection. You've got to get it out, look at it for what it is, so that you can be more present with, yes, this has to change. We've got to be part of this change, you know?
Yeah, I think education is part of the action, you know, like learning, listening, learning, reading, looking at the work that other people have been doing for a long time, and educating ourselves and educating each other as best we can is part of our action plan. You know?
It's crucial. It's really crucial.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. More thoughts?
I just wanted to say, so the white privilege piece I felt was just talking amongst, just white people talking amongst themselves about, you know, the brainwash is not, it's crucial, but you have to also take more actions than that. I mean, I do think processing that are the beginning pieces of shifting, but you have to do more. You know, if you just sit back and just talk amongst yourselves and do nothing, that's a huge problem, obviously. Anyway.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you. And being willing to screw up, right? I mean, race is something that we are all so afraid to talk about, particularly if we are not people that experience racial discrimination, because the fear of being, you know, called a racist, it's that white fragility, right? Like the sense of vulnerability that, like, no one can ever think of me that way. And that any blind spot, of which we have many, means that we've somehow, you know, like failed to be a good person, right? And like equating, even when I say we have a moral responsibility to hope, and I talk about it in this virtuistic kind of way and moralizing kind of way, I don't think that, like, whether or not you behave morally appropriate is like your determines the value of your personhood, right? We all screw up. We all, like, fail to do our best in a lot of ways, and we all behave in ways that are not perhaps morally appropriate. And the best we can do is, like, see them, learn, and try and do better. But we have to be willing to go through that process again and again and again. Hi, Emily. Hi. Are you okay?
Okay. My heart is racing.
It's okay.
First off, thank you for hosting this session about hope. I have a question about the long range, the endurance of hope. I've been waking up every morning thinking to myself, welcome to a white supremacist world. And that's been my new lens. And I've been trying really hard to, like, you live in a white supremacist world, you have privilege. How does that feel? Get discomfortable. And I know that that's not long range. I know I'm going to burn out with that. And so what now I'm going to wake up and say, thanks to you, is, wow, how exciting. I get a bunch of stuff to work on today. I get to work on stuff today. How privileged I am to live in a time where I have so much to work on. Hope is not trendy right now. Anger is trendy, rage is trendy, and I get that. But when I start being my cute white girl that's hopeful, how can I make sure to not perpetuate my privilege as a hopeful person, and use hope to be just as angry, but it's like I am hopeful in my anger. I don't know. No, I'm not saying that well, but I'm going to be called out for being a cute, hopeful girl. So how can we make sure that hope looks radical? That's my question.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think that, like, in a way, I think hope is a foundation more than like an expression for our work here necessarily, right? Well, there are two things that you said. One that I wanted to just highlight before I answer your question, which is I get to look at all the things I get to work on, right? And then I live in this one where I get to work on it. And also look at the privilege that I have and the resources that I have with which to work on this stuff. That's one thing I didn't talk about in the main presentation, but I want to note here is that, like, we all have different amount of resources with which to work on this stuff, and different educational backgrounds, and different amounts of money, and different, like, access. And so the kind of work that each of us does is going to look different based on where we are in that sort of scale, and should be proportionate to our resources, right? If we're talking about, like, our moral responsibility, it's probably should be proportionate to our resources, right? So that's just something to know. I think when you said, how do I be hopeful in my anger? And then you said, I'm not expressing myself right. I think that that's exactly the way to express it. Like, I really do. I think that, like, I think hope has to be the foundation for all of the work, because otherwise you're not going to keep doing the work, right? And you don't necessarily have to shout your hope to the world. You do the work, and you do the work not knowing what's going to happen, without any guarantee, hoping that there is a future, but you don't need to, I don't know that you need to announce your hope, right? I think you can let it be the thing that keeps you stable, and the thing that keeps you, just like a good night's sleep, like, keeps you able to work, right? And good nutrition and all of those other things with that, like, we need in order to keep going. I think hope is like that. And so it doesn't have to be in the same way that when we talk to people about social justice work, you say, like, you got to put on your own oxygen mask before you, like, help other people. I think hope is part of that. That's my sense of it. I'm going to take you, can I put you back? Can I unmute you again so I can unmute? Okay.
Yeah, I think using hope as like a reservoir, like your vitamins. It's and you don't have to announce it. So when you and you said be proportionate to what your resources are. Like, this is my maternity leave right now. So, like, I have to remember that I have a tiny little baby, and I've actually been kind of worried that this tiny little baby can feel my stress and my anger.
Mm.
And so to like be, maybe all that my work is right now is to be hopeful, use that as the reservoir, use that as the night sleep, be stable from that place, and then move grains of rice over every day. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I can't, only you can know that, right? What the appropriate action for you is right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I do think that, part of it is being able to have enough of those internal resources to keep doing the work, because if you burn yourself out and then you stop, you're not good to anybody.
Yeah.
Right. And certainly you don't feel good about being in the world at that point. Right. So like, it's a marathon, not a sprint, and you need to treat it that way.
Well, and the first question about how do we talk to somebody who's still in anger, we have a foundation of hope now, and just to recognize that there's still in anger on the path. Like Brandon's been a little bit like, we've been at different points in our path. Like I'll wake up and just be angry, and he's like, let's work towards compassion. And I'm like, oh, no, anger. So just like use your hope reservoir to meet, just know that they're on the path. And we get to work on this stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's part of why Martin Luther King said the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice, right? Because he had to do the work believing that it would improve. And Cornel West has said he will die a prisoner of hope. At the same time, there are some leaders, Ta-Nehisi Coates is just like, no, there's no moral arc of the universe. It's chaos, and the people who want things will take it, and that's it, right? Like there's no divine justice here. And he is, I think for some people of color, hope feels like a luxury, right? And I think that that's important to understand too. That maybe, it may be that as a white person, for me, hope is a luxury. And I'm going to hold on to it because I think it helps me do the work. And it helps me create the world that I want to create. But I go into that knowing that there are different people in the world with different experiences than mine. And not expecting, there may be more to learn still. Well, everybody, we've reached our hour and a half. So I want to thank you all for being here and for asking your questions. Thank you again, Sarah, for being our little person, our guinea pig client there. So I just want to remind you all to please come visit me at my website, daniellesusa.com, and I will be doing another one of these. I'm actually going to share my screen one more time because I've got the one for next month. No, hang on, sorry. You see all of my tabs, all 500 of my tabs are open at the same time. Let's see, where did it go? Ah, there it is. Okay. Let's try again. This one. No. Why is that happening? There we go. Can you see it now? Yes, okay. All right, so there's me. Please send me an email or you can call me if you want to talk more. I'm happy to talk more about this. You can also go there. You can see I have other videos, I have a YouTube channel, I've got blogs, the whole, all the things. And then next month, we are going to do, the theme is going to be called Make Your Purpose. And it comes from this idea that I think a lot of people have, that we are supposed to find our purpose out there in the world, that if we can just find our purpose, that all will be right and we will know what to do with our lives and we will feel like we have meaning. And I'm going to suggest that we don't find our purpose, we make it. So that will be next month's class. It will be Sunday, 4th of July weekend in the afternoon. I decided to go ahead and do it that weekend because it's the end of the weekend and maybe you'll be around. Not like there's parties to go to now, right? Anyway, but I bid you all good day and thank you so much for coming, and I hope to see you all here again next month.